Uh, they looked at you, and something in them closed around you, like a door that finally found its frame. Something is tightening, not uncomfortably, not with the suffocating pressure of something that constricts, with the particular, almost imperceptible tension of something that has been loose for too long, finally finding its correct position, a settling, a locking into place. The specific sound, felt rather than heard, of something that has been searching without fully admitting that it was searching, arriving at the thing it was looking for and recognizing it, quietly and completely, as the end of the search. Stay with that image for a moment. Let it sit in you before we go any further. There are people who move through the world collecting near misses. Connection after connection that almost fits, that holds a certain warmth, a certain compatibility, a certain surface level rightness that makes the thing functional, livable, even genuinely good, but that never quite settles into the deeper register, never quite reaches the frequency where something in the chest goes still and says, without equivocation, without the familiar background hum of unresolved uncertainty, this one, not because it's perfect, not because it's easy, but because something about its specific construction meets something about yours in a way that no amount of effort or goodwill or genuine compatibility has ever replicated with anyone else. You may be someone's end of the search. Let me tell you what possession, real possession, not the controlling, diminishing kind, but the other kind, the kind that has nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with recognition. Let me tell you what it feels like from the inside of the person experiencing it. It feels like the sudden, slightly alarming realization that a very specific person has become non negotiable, not preferred, not desired, non negotiable, as in the architecture of an imagined future keeps rearranging itself no matter how many times it is deliberately constructed without them back into a shape that requires their presence. As in, the question of what this life looks like without them has stopped producing an answer that feels like anything other than absence wearing the clothes of a life. This reflection invites you to consider, what does it bring up in you in the most unguarded and honest part of your interior? To sit with the possibility that someone has reached the point of non negotiable about you, that the version of their life without you has stopped being an option they can construct with any conviction. Because that possibility held honestly, without immediately deflecting it or minimizing it or processing it into something more manageable, asks something of you. It asks you to occupy your own irreplaceability, to let the fact of being someone's non negotiable mean something, not as a source of power over them, but as information about your own worth, about what you carry, about the specific and unrepeatable quality of your presence that has made substitution for this person not a practical alternative, but an impossibility disguised as one. Picture a key and a lock, not a metaphor about compatibility, something more specific than that. A key that was made without knowing it for one lock. That has been tried in other locks, some of them close, some of them similar in shape, some of them functioning well enough to serve the practical purposes that locks and keys are supposed to serve. But that fits in the specific way that changes the quality of the fit from functional to inevitable in only one place. And the lock that receives it doesn't simply open, it recognizes. There is a difference felt in the mechanism of the thing between a key that works and a key that belongs. And belonging, when it is felt, produces something that working never quite manages to replicate. Mm, some of you have been the key tried in the wrong locks for long enough that you've started to doubt the key itself. Started to wonder whether the problem is with the thing you're carrying rather than with the things it's been asked to fit. Started to quietly, privately revise your understanding of what fit is supposed to feel like, loosening your own definition of belonging to accommodate a series of connections that were good, perhaps genuinely good, but that never produced the specific quality of recognition that the deepest part of you has always known it was looking for. This reflection invites you to consider, where have you been adjusting your definition of belonging to accommodate something that was always closer to functional than to true? And what would it mean to stop making that adjustment, to let your original and unrevised understanding of what fit actually feels like be the standard again? Because true love, and I use that phrase carefully, without romanticism, without the soft focus haze that tends to gather around it, true love is not at its core a feeling. It is a recognition, a specific, almost involuntary acknowledgement that something in front of you corresponds to something in you that has been waiting to be corresponded to. It doesn't always arrive with the dramatic, cinematic intensity that the stories we inherit about love tend to promise. It arrives more often with something quieter than intensity and more durable than excitement. It arrives with the particular relief of something finally making sense, of something that has been slightly, persistently, undeniably off in every other direction, suddenly, in this one direction, being completely, simply, undeniably right. And the person who is about to move, who has reached the point of non negotiable, who has looked at the architecture of their own wanting and found your presence at its center, irremovable. That person may not announce themselves with the vocabulary of love. They may not have the language for what they're experiencing or the confidence to offer the language, even if they had it. But they will move in the particular way that people move when they have stopped managing their own feelings and started simply following them, with the slightly disorienting momentum of someone who has been still for a long time and has finally, at some private and unannounced moment, decided to stop being still. This reflection invites you to consider, what would it feel like to be claimed, not controlled, not possessed in the diminishing sense, but genuinely, seriously, exclusively claimed by someone who has looked at everything available to them and chosen without reservation you? Because being claimed like that is not a simple experience to sit with, particularly for someone who has spent significant time in connections where the claiming was conditional or inconsistent, or always slightly provisional, always containing the unspoken asterisk of someone who hadn't quite decided, who was keeping the door slightly open, who was present without being fully committed to presence. That kind of conditional claiming leaves a residue. A learned caution around the word exclusive, around the concept of someone deciding that nobody else will do, around the very idea that a person could look at you and feel with genuine and unambiguous certainty that the search is over. Huh. But that residue is not the truth of what you deserve. It is the accumulated evidence of what you've survived. And those are not the same thing, however much they have come to feel like it. Let me say something that I think needs to be said without softening. The person who is about to snatch you up that phrase, unglamorous as it is, contains something real, something urgent. Not with the urgency of desperation, but with the urgency of someone who has finally understood what they're looking at, who has spent enough time in your proximity or in the absence of your proximity to know with the specific, irreversible knowing of a person who has tested the alternative and found it entirely insufficient, that they are not willing to continue without making something clear, without closing the distance, without making the invisible non negotiable visible in whatever way is available to them. Some of you have been waiting for exactly this, not consciously perhaps, not in the way that involves active anticipation or the deliberate cultivation of hope, but in the quieter way that the body waits for things it has decided to want with a low, persistent readiness, a subtle orientation toward a specific direction that has never entirely relaxed, regardless of how much the conscious mind has tried to redirect it, to redirect you into something more manageable and less uncertain. That readiness is not weakness, it is not neediness, it is not any of the unflattering things that wanting something specific and refusing to fully stop wanting it tends to be called. It is simply the honest response of a person who knows what they're looking for and has not been willing, in the most fundamental part of themselves, to pretend that something else is the same thing. The power is yours. It always has been. Not the power to make someone love you. Love that is made is not love, it is performance. And performance, however convincing, always eventually reveals the mechanism beneath it. But the power to recognize real love when it moves toward you, to let the recognition be enough to override the learned caution, to remain in the face of something serious and real and closing the distance with visible intention, genuinely and completely open to being found. Nobody can have you but me. This person is about to snatch you up. This is your true love. Not eventually already decided, already certain in the private interior of someone who has finished the argument with themselves and arrived without ceremony at you, at the specific, irreplaceable, entirely non negotiable fact of you. Trust yourself with this. The recognition you're feeling, that quiet, almost frightening sense of something becoming real, is not imagination dressed as instinct. It is simply the truth arriving in the only form truth ever actually arrives in, quietly, completely, and without asking your permission to matter. Before you go, I want to hear from you in the comments. What does it feel like, in the most specific and honest terms, to imagine being someone's non negotiable, the person they look at and feel without equivocation, is the end of the search? And what is the one thing that has made it difficult in the past to fully receive the experience of being genuinely and exclusively chosen? Drop it below. I read every single word, and nothing shared here goes unwitnessed or unacknowledged. See you in the next one. And listen, when someone decides that nobody else will do, that decision has already changed the shape of what's possible. Even before they've said a word, even before they've moved, the decision itself is the beginning of everything. Take care.